Many people grow up believing that laziness is a personal flaw. When something feels difficult or when motivation disappears, the first conclusion is often simple and harsh. I'm just lazy. This label becomes familiar. It feels like an explanation, even though it explains very little. Most people don't stop and ask where this feeling actually comes from. They don't question why energy appears easily for some things, but completely disappears for others. Instead, they turn the experience into an identity. Laziness stops being a temporary state and becomes a definition of who they are. But when you look more closely, the picture changes. People who call themselves lazy are often capable, intelligent, and deeply aware of what they should be doing. The problem is not a lack of ability or desire. It's the gap between intention and action. This gap creates frustration, and frustration quickly turns inward. Self-judgment replaces curiosity. Instead of asking why resistance is present, people blame themselves for feeling it. This is where the misunderstanding begins, because what we call laziness is rarely a character flaw. It is usually a signal, one that points to something happening beneath the surface, not a lack of willpower. Laziness is often treated as a simple explanation because it feels convenient. It allows us to stop looking deeper. If the problem is a flaw in character, there's nothing more to understand, only something to fix or punish. But real behavior doesn't work that way. People are rarely inactive by nature. They move, think, plan, worry, and consume information constantly. What we call laziness usually shows up only in specific areas, tasks that feel overwhelming, unclear, emotionally loaded, or disconnected from meaning. This reveals an important truth. The issue is not a lack of energy, but how energy is being directed. The system is active, but it is avoiding something for a reason. Laziness becomes a label that hides insight. Instead of asking what the resistance is protecting us from, we judge the resistance itself. And in doing so, we miss the opportunity to understand the underlying mechanism that is actually shaping our behavior. The human brain is not designed for ambition or constant progress. Its primary role is survival, to conserve energy, to avoid danger, to maintain what feels familiar and predictable. From this perspective, resistance makes sense. Anything new, uncertain, or demanding is interpreted as a potential threat. Even positive changes, learning a new skill, starting a project, changing routines, require energy and introduce unpredictability. The brain responds by slowing things down. This response is not a defect. It is a protective mechanism. The brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do: minimize risk and preserve resources. What feels like laziness is often the nervous system choosing safety over effort. Understanding this changes the narrative. Resistance is not proof of weakness. It is a signal that the system is trying to protect itself. And when protection is mistaken for failure, people begin to fight themselves instead of working with how their brain actually functions. Much of human behavior is guided not by conscious choice, but by familiar patterns. The brain relies on repetition because it is efficient. What has been done before requires less energy than what has never been tried. Over time, these repeated behaviors become programs. They form automatic responses, habits, and routines that run without active thought. The brain labels these patterns as safe simply because they are known. When someone tries to act outside of these established patterns, resistance appears. Not because the action is wrong, but because it is unfamiliar. The system slows down, creates hesitation, and generates excuses to return to what feels secure. This is why people often feel stuck even when they want to change. The desire for growth conflicts with a system that is optimized for familiarity. What looks like laziness is often the brain defending an old program that once served a purpose, even if it no longer does. What often looks like laziness is actually an emotional signal. Procrastination rarely appears without a reason. Beneath the avoidance, there's usually something uncomfortable waiting to be felt: fear of failure, fear of judgment, overwhelm, or inner conflict. When a task is connected to uncertainty or emotional risk, the brain associates it with discomfort. The system responds by delaying action, not to sabotage progress, but to prevent an unpleasant internal state. Avoidance becomes a form of emotional regulation. This is why people can feel exhausted before they even begin. The energy is not lacking. It is being spent internally, managing tension, doubt, or pressure. The body and mind slow action to avoid intensifying these feelings. Seen this way, laziness is not the problem. It is the message, a signal that something beneath the surface needs clarity, safety, or a different approach. And until that signal is understood, forcing action only deepens resistance. This is why motivation and willpower so often fail. Motivation comes in waves. It rises with inspiration and fades when effort is required. Willpower is limited, and when it is used to fight the system, it drains quickly. Trying to force productivity through motivation is like pushing against a current. It may work briefly, but the resistance always returns. The underlying programs remain unchanged, waiting to reassert themselves once the initial drive fades. When people rely on motivation alone, they blame themselves for inconsistency. They assume they lack discipline, when in reality they are asking short-term energy to overpower long-term conditioning. Lasting change does not come from forcing the system to obey. It comes from understanding how the system works and adjusting the conditions around it. Without that understanding, motivation becomes a temporary fix for a structural problem. What actually leads to change is awareness, not pressure, not self-criticism. Awareness allows you to see the patterns that are already running your behavior. When a person understands what triggers resistance, what feels unsafe, and where energy is being blocked, the system no longer needs to protect itself as strongly. Clarity reduces threat. Understanding creates cooperation instead of conflict. Change becomes possible when conditions are adjusted, not when the mind is forced. Shifting the environment, reducing complexity, breaking tasks into smaller steps, and creating predictability all signal safety to the brain. In this state, action no longer feels like a fight, it feels natural. The system stops resisting because it no longer senses danger. Awareness turns effort into alignment. Large goals often trigger the strongest resistance, not because they are impossible, but because they signal uncertainty, effort, and long-term commitment. To the brain, a big goal looks like a threat, too much energy, too many unknowns, too much risk. Small actions work differently. They feel safe, manageable, non-threatening. A single step does not demand transformation, so the system allows it. This is why small steps bypass resistance instead of confronting it. When action is reduced to something minimal, the brain no longer needs to defend itself. There is no danger to avoid, no overload to manage. Over time, these small actions accumulate and quietly reshape behavior. This is how new patterns are formed, not through force or ambition, but through consistency at a scale the system can accept. Small steps don't fight the program, they rewrite it. When people stop calling themselves lazy, something important shifts. The pressure softens, self-judgment loosens its grip. And in that space, curiosity begins to replace blame. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" the question becomes, "What is happening in me right now?" This change in perspective transforms the entire relationship with action. Resistance is no longer an enemy to fight, but information to understand. Self-blame drains energy. Understanding restores it. When the inner dialogue becomes supportive rather than critical, the system feels safer. And when the system feels safe, it becomes more willing to move. This shift doesn't make action effortless overnight, but it removes the invisible weight that was holding everything down. Progress becomes possible not because pressure increased, but because conflict decreased. You are not broken, you are not weak, and you are not failing at life. What you experience as laziness is most often the result of conditioning, protection, and patterns that were formed over time. Your behavior makes sense when you understand the system behind it. The brain follows what it has learned, what feels safe, and what conserves energy. And once this becomes clear, the need for self-attack disappears. Change does not begin with force. It begins with understanding. When you work with the system instead of against it, movement becomes possible again, quietly, steadily, and without self-violence. You are not lazy. You are programmed. And what is programmed can be understood, adjusted, and gradually rewritten.